A wooden chair flew across the mess hall and slammed into the wall, rattling the ceiling light above. Otto fell backward, blood gushing from his nose, dripping onto the cold cement floor. Franz, a corporal with a scar slashed across his cheek, lunged forward like a provoked beast, roaring in German, "Traitor! Did you eat the Americans' candy?" Shouts erupted. The crowded hall of prisoners turned into a boiling cauldron. Fists clenched, chairs toppled, half-eaten turkey plates crashed to the ground, hot coffee spilled across the floor. Some tried to intervene, others egged them on, and soon no one could tell who was friend or foe. From the porch, U.S. guards blew their whistles, the shrill sound cutting through the chaos. Rifle barrels glinted under the string lights. One shouted, "Back! Everyone back! Stop now!" But the order only fueled the frenzy, as Franz pinned Otto to the ground. Pounding his chest with hammer-like fists, music floated from a loudspeaker at the edge of the porch. Silent night. Holy night. The gentle voice drifted into the brawl like a bitter joke. And so, Christmas of 1944 at Camp Hearn, Texas did not begin with prayers. It began with blood on cement, curses tangled with carols, and a hatred that had not cooled since the other side of the ocean. That night, Camp Hearn had been built to hold thousands of German POWs. In December, the Americans decided to organize a Christmas party for them. In the central yard stood a pine tree nearly 10 feet tall, wrapped in colorful lights. The scent of pine mixed with gingerbread and hot coffee made the air unlike any other day. On the tables lay red-wrapped gift boxes, American cigarettes, chewing gum, pencils, stationery, small Bibles. For many prisoners, these were luxuries unseen through years of war. Some reached out with trembling hands to touch the bulbs, eyes lighting up with memories of Hamburg, Berlin, Munich, before the bombs fell, but not everyone felt the same. Franz, always proud, always insisting that accepting anything from the enemy was degrading, threw his package to the ground. He stomped on the cookie box and shouted, "This is a trick! They want to turn us into tail-wagging dogs." His words struck like a spark on dry straw. Some shouted with him, others bent down to pick up crumbs and tuck them into their pockets. The line between accepting or refusing American gifts suddenly became the line between preserving dignity or selling your soul. Franz's punch to Otto, the man who had just tasted his first gingerbread in 3 years, was the opening shot of the melee. And it marked the moment when even among countrymen, war sowed division. That night, few slept. Arguments echoed through the barracks, mingling with the footsteps of patrolling guards. Some pulled their blankets over their heads and cried for home. Others cursed the phony kindness of the Americans, while a few chewed their gum slowly, savoring a fragile reminder of a distant, warmer world. I stayed awake too. The scene etched itself into my bones. The blinking lights on wooden walls, the pool of red on cement, the unfinished carol still playing. I realized Christmas in camp was no mere holiday. It was another battlefield where pride, hunger, and family memories clashed violently. And from that chaotic night, unexpected things began to surface. A strange feast, surprising gifts, and moments no prisoner ever thought he would experience behind barbed wire. The next morning, Camp Hearn sank into an atmosphere as heavy as cold iron. The roll call whistle shrieked from the guard tower, dragging every prisoner into the yard. But unlike any other day, no one dared to mutter or complain. They stood rigid, eyes fixed straight ahead like gray statues. Franz and Otto were absent. Rumors spread like wildfire. They had been dragged away in the night, locked up in the punishment block. Some whispered that Franz had broken ribs. Others said Otto's bleeding hadn't stopped. Every word was hushed, every voice lowered, as if afraid the American guards might hear. The camp commander, a tall American captain with a voice rough as sandpaper, stepped out before the ranks. He read slowly in English, deliberately enough for everyone to understand. "Any more fighting? No gifts, no parties, no privileges. He paused, sweeping his gaze across pale faces, his narrowed eyes full of warning. Then he turned and walked away, leaving behind an air thicker than the Texas dawn fog. Inside the barracks, last night's brawl became a thorn lodged in every group. Men like Franz saw rejecting American gifts as a matter of honor. They whispered, "If we accept, we become their propaganda tools." Meanwhile, men like Otto, hungry, exhausted, stripped of pride, quietly shared scraps of dry bread, nibbling in secret as if it were contraband. These two views hardened into underground factions. In every barrack, glances grew sharper, curt nods replaced greetings. A miniature version of defeated Germany reappeared behind the wire. Some clung to loyalty until the end, others just longed to survive. I sat silently, feeling torn in two. Part of me wanted to shout at Franz, "Stop this madness, we're only starving men." But another part trembled, terrified that if I openly sided with Otto, I'd be branded a traitor, beaten, and cast out. At noon, the makeshift canteen reopened. The Americans still carried out trays of roast chicken, white bread, boiled corn, even steaming cups of coffee. The aroma drifted across the yard, stabbing into our empty stomachs. Yet no one ate comfortably anymore. Every bite slid down like lead, weighted by the eyes of those watching. A fellow prisoner named Weber, sitting beside me, whispered with a shaky voice, "Jakob, don't you see? We're eating like guilty men." I didn't reply. I just stared into the tin cup before me, the dark coffee swirling as if it was someone's eye watching me. That afternoon, another scuffle broke out. A prisoner hiding a piece of chewing gum in his pocket was discovered. Franz wasn't there, but his loyal followers pounced, tearing it away, throwing it to the ground, grinding it under their heels. The American guards stepped in, pulling both sides apart. No one was hurt, but suspicion grew thicker, almost suffocating. The Americans, strangely, kept silent. They didn't beat us, didn't bark orders. They simply stood there, scribbling in notebooks, as if observing some social experiment. That indifference gnawed at us more than punishment would have. At least shouting would mean emotion. Silence meant they saw everything clearly and could act whenever they chose. That night, I lay on my bunk, eyes wide in the dark. The fight replayed in my mind. Otto's bleeding nose, Franz's roar, the carol echoing like mockery. I realized our greatest fear wasn't American discipline. It was the division eating us alive from within. Once the war had bound us together. We shared scraps of bread, shielded each other in bomb craters. But inside this barbed wire cage, there were no bombs, only little gifts, pieces of gum, and even those were enough to tear us apart. The next day, an unexpected notice appeared. The administration had posted a message. Christmas party will continue as planned. The news hit like a second bomb. Some quietly cheered, others hissed in rage. To men like Franz, it was pure humiliation. To the starving, it was a lifeline. As for me, I only stared at the paper fluttering in the wind and wondered, could a single party mend the cracks already tearing through us? Or would it spark another storm? And so, the shadow of the brawl still hung over us, hovering like a blade waiting to fall again. In the days leading up to the holiday, I understood something. Camp Herne wasn't just a prison. It was a mirror of defeated Germany, shattered, divided, and always on the verge of exploding, even over a crumb of gingerbread. That night, when the final roll call whistle faded and the searchlight swept across the yard like the cold eyes of a watchman, many prisoners lay silent on their bunks, staring wide-eyed into the dark. No one spoke, but I knew their minds were traveling to the same place, home and the Christmas forever missed. I closed my eyes, and instead of the rotting wooden ceiling above me, I saw again my mother's house in Hamburg. Frosted windows, candlelight flickering inside. My father hanging a glass ornament on the tree, while my sister Lena softly hummed a carol. My breath trembled, not from the Texas cold, but from the sweetness of the memory, so sharp it ached. On the next bunk, Carl whispered in his thick Bavarian accent, "At home, by now we'd be sitting around the wooden table, drinking Glühwein." My father always poured in extra rum, said it warmed the stomach. A few men chuckled faintly, but the sound was brittle. Another voice drifted from the corner, deep and distant. We had roast goose, and my mother always baked stollen with almonds hidden inside. Whoever found one was promised luck for the whole year. Their fragments of speech were like shards of broken glass, but they glimmered in the darkness, piecing together a picture no one could touch anymore. I turned to Joseph, once a philosophy student in Berlin. He sat with his chin resting on his hand, staring out the tiny window where moonlight spilled through the bars like silver blades. "What are you thinking about?" I asked quietly. Joseph gave a sad smile. "The last Christmas I spent at home, I argued with my father about the war. He believed Germany needed strength. I said, people needed peace more. I walked out, down the street, listening to others sing O Tannenbaum. I promised myself I'd come back next year and apologize." He was silent a long time before whispering, "There was no next year." The air in the barracks grew heavy, the air in the Kelly. The wind whistled through the cracks in the boards, creaking as if echoing his gloom. Then Franz, the former Ruhr miner, spoke in his raspy but heartfelt voice. "Do you remember the smell of pine? When you just cut the tree in the forest, sap still fresh, the scent mixing with smoke from the stove, doesn't smell like here. Here it's only rust and dry dirt." The whole room fell quiet. The smell of pine, of baked bread, of melting snow, all came rushing back so vividly it almost fooled us into believing that opening our eyes would bring it before us. But when we did, it was only wooden walls, barbed wire, and guards' shadows. A young soldier, barely 19, spoke nervously. "At home, I once played a toy soldier in the church's Christmas play. Now, I'm a real soldier." But no one claps. The fragile words choked us. War had stolen his youth, turning a role in a play into a life sentence. In the dark, someone softly began to sing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. The voice was small, trembling, but it spread. Another joined in, then another. I sang too, needing to feel I wasn't alone. That melody required no instruments, no church, just lost souls clinging to each other through memory. When the song faded, I realized many were crying. Not loud sobs, but tears slipping silently down cheeks, soaking straw pillows, like children waking from a nightmare, desperate for their mother's lullaby. I thought of Miller, not because she was part of my Christmas past, but because she was why I still thought about the future. For a moment, I imagined being free tonight, sitting with her beside a small tree, offering her a simple gift, maybe only a hand-sewn handkerchief or a scrap of verse I'd written. And I would say, in halting English, "Merry Christmas, Margaret." The thought stabbed my heart, but kept me from sinking completely. Suddenly, Carl whispered, "Do you think the Americans will hold Christmas for us?" The barracks broke into dry laughter, tinged with doubt. "They probably just want to mock us, or slip more beans into the rations." Yet in many eyes, I saw a flicker, too faint to be hope, but a tiny spark of expectation, like a candle in a storm. I pulled my torn blanket to my chin, closed my eyes, and let my mind wander back. I saw myself under the tree in Hamburg, beside my sister, listening to my father sing and my mother smile. Then the image blurred, fading into the Texas wind and the footsteps of guards changing shift. That night, Camp Hearn was a prison full of ghosts, living men who survived only through memory, But those memories, of candles, of pine scent, of sacred carols, kept us from shattering completely. And I knew then, this Christmas, though separated from home by an ocean, would still exist here, not through trees or presents, but through longing itself, which reminded us that even as prisoners, we were still human. That Christmas morning at Herne began like every other. The piercing whistle at dawn, the tramp of guard boots, and the smell of thin oatmeal drifting from the mess hall. No one expected anything. For most of us, Christmas existed only in last night's memories, stories of Hamburg, Berlin, or Bavaria that had flared up like candles in the dark. I trudged into the mess hall with Karl and Josef. The familiar wooden room looked so different we stopped dead at the doorway. Before us, paper streamers, clumsy, hand-cut from cardboard, hung along the walls. A real pine tree stood in the corner, nearly touching the ceiling, decorated with shiny beer can lids and a few small bulbs powered by a generator. On the tables, instead of watery porridge, there was white bread, golden butter, and roast chicken. A ripple of shock passed through the prisoners like a sudden wind. Some stared in disbelief. A few laughed bitterly, convinced it was a cruel joke. But the American guards standing around showed no mockery on their faces. A dark-skinned sergeant, his voice southern and thick, spoke in broken German. "Today, Christmas. No work. Eat, drink, play music." Karl rasped. "They're throwing Christmas for us?" No one could believe their ears. Trays of food were passed around. Gingerbread cookies fragrant with spice, shiny red apples, and, to everyone's astonishment, chewing gum and Camel cigarettes. Things scarce even for Texans outside the wire. Josef muttered, eyes wide. "Gum. Cigarettes. They're insane." I stared at the stacks of tobacco, remembering children in Hamburg with outstretched hands begging for candy. My chest tightened. At home, people starved, while here the enemy handed us Christmas gifts. A small American band appeared with guitar, trumpet, even a harmonica. They began singing Silent Night in English, then awkwardly switched to Stille Nacht in German. The room went still. Many bowed their heads, hiding tears in the glow of yellow bulbs. I sat frozen, cookie in hand, unable to swallow. A question hammered in my skull. Why were they doing this? To prove their humanity, their power, or to flaunt that even their prisoners lived better than civilians in Germany? At the next table, an argument flared. One man, face red, slammed his fist. "This is humiliation. They give us gifts while our homeland starves. Sitting here enjoying this is betrayal." Another snapped back. "Shut up. It's Christmas. This is the first cookie I've seen in 3 years. I'll eat it, and I'm not ashamed." The tension stretched like a wire, ready to snap, just as it had the night before. A guard stepped forward, hand on his rifle, but stopped when the sergeant signaled. Thankfully, the quarrel cooled, though suspicion still hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Karl. He chewed his roast chicken slowly, then sighed. Strange. They could shoot us on the battlefield, but here they feed us until we're full on this holiday. I didn't answer. Inside me, 2 feelings fought. A quiet gratitude for glimpsing Christmas warmth again, and a heavy guilt, knowing my family in Hamburg lived among ruins. A moment later, the sergeant brought out a wooden crate and set it in the middle of the room. He pried off the lid. Inside were small packages, wrapped in newspaper, tied with twine. "Gifts for you." Not much. But Merry Christmas. Each prisoner stepped up to take one. Inside could be a handkerchief, a pair of socks, even a tiny Bible. When I opened mine, I found a wooden pencil and a small notebook with yellowed pages. My hands shook. I held the pencil as if a stolen part of my voice had been given back. Looking up, I caught Miller's gaze from across the room. She nodded slightly, as if to say, "Right, Jakob." The room grew warmer. Someone began to sing. Others tapped rhythms on the table. A small group danced around the tree, the Americans clapping and laughing along. For a fleeting moment, the barbed wire vanished. We were no longer prisoners and guards, but simply lost souls who had stumbled upon each other on a winter's night far from home. But inside me, the conflict still burned. I felt warmed, yet mocked. I wondered if Miller felt the same. When our eyes met again, I saw the same flicker in her amber gaze, tender, aching, unsettled. When the feast ended, the prisoners shuffled out, each clutching a small gift. Outside, the night wind howled, but many still carried the warmth inside. I held my notebook tight against my chest, as if it were a piece of Christmas, of freedom, of myself. That night in the barracks, whispers floated. Maybe the enemy isn't all demons. Others snapped back, "Don't be naive. This is just psychological trickery." The argument lingered, but I stayed silent, scribbling the first line in my new notebook. Not a poem, not a diary, just one simple sentence. Tonight, I remembered I was human. Christmas night had passed, but its echoes lingered in the camp. Not everyone felt joy. Some prisoners muttered bitterly, convinced the small gifts were nothing more than psychological tricks. Others quietly tucked away their boxes of candy, pairs of socks or handkerchiefs, preserving them like fragments of warmth from a life once human. In the barracks, division was sharp. Carl, stubborn as ever, hurled a peppermint into the stove and grumbled, "They think a few pieces of sugar will make us forget we're prisoners." From a dark corner, another voice rose. "At least it's sweeter than the watery soup we get every day." The clash revealed two worldviews colliding in the minds of defeated soldiers. One side clung to old pride, fearing that even the slightest softening was betrayal. The other craved humanity, longing to feel some shred of warmth, even if only through a box of cookies or a pair of wool socks. Jakob was different. He didn't eat the chocolate bar he'd been given. Instead, he carefully rewrapped it and slid it under his pillow like a treasure. In the silent night, his fingers brushed the thin foil as though it held not just sugar, but memory itself. That memory carried him back to Hamburg, Christmas of 1942. The city had not yet been scarred by bombs. In the square, a towering tree glowed with thousands of lights. Children held hands singing carols, and his mother, in her thick wool sweater, waited patiently in line to buy Stollen. He remembered the scent of butter, raisins, the spicy sweetness of cinnamon and ginger. His sister Lena had just been given a rag doll, clutching it tightly through the night. The images surged over him like a wave. In Hearn's cramped, damp barrack, Jakob smiled without realizing. Then the smile faded. He wondered, was Hamburg still celebrating Christmas? Had his mother survived the bombings? Was Lena still singing carols somewhere among the rubble? Karl's cough pulled him back to the present. In the weak glow of the oil lamp, Jakob saw his comrades' faces, gaunt, aged, yet their eyes shone brighter than the night before. Perhaps, though unspoken, all had been stirred by the small gifts. The next day, Jakob carried his candy box to roll call. He shared it with 3 younger prisoners, new arrivals from another camp, their faces still pale and dazed. One of them, Hans, barely 20, held the red candy in his hand, trembling, tears welling up. "The last time I saw candy like this was at my village church," Hans whispered, "before I was drafted." In that moment, Jakob understood. The gifts were not only for eating, they were for remembering, and memory helped them hold on to their humanity. That afternoon, prisoners were permitted to write a few lines home. The paper was thin postcards stamped "Prisoner of War Post." The ink smudged, the pens were blunt, but every man pressed carefully, deliberately, as if carving his heart onto the page. Jakob wrote, "Dearest mother, I am still alive. Here, We just had Christmas, even with gifts. I remember Hamburg. I remember Lena. If you still have the stove, please bake Stollen. Someday, I will return. He knew the letter might take months to arrive, if it ever did, but writing the words tethered him with the thinnest thread to home. That evening, Jakob opened the small blue notebook, the gift a kind American nurse had slipped to him after he complained of sleepless nights. He wrote, "Christmas 1944. I am alive. I received candy, socks, and music. I remembered Hamburg. I do not want to forget." When he finished the last line, Jakob felt strangely light. He knew tomorrow would bring labor again, barbed wire discipline again. But the memory of Christmas had become a small candle, lighting his soul in this foreign prison. None of them knew how long the war would last, or what fate awaited them. But that night, as the wind howled through the eucalyptus trees and dry leaves rustled, they slept more peacefully. Beneath their pillows, the little gifts lay still, reminders that even in darkness, humanity could still find a spark of light. The spirit of Christmas seemed to fade with the last candles, yet its echoes clung to every corner of the barracks and every corridor of Camp Hearn. Those small gifts, candy boxes, pairs of socks, handkerchiefs, became smoldering embers, fueling an endless debate. The morning after the holiday, in Barrack 12, arguments erupted. Becker, a former Berlin schoolteacher, snapped, "Don't be naive. It's all an American trick. They want us weak. They want us to forget who we are." Across from him, Franz, a machinist who'd lost his wife in the Dresden bombings, clutched his new socks, eyes red. And what if it is a trick? For the first time in years, I felt like a man, not just a number. They didn't shoot us. They let us sing. They gave us candy. Isn't that worth something? Voices rose, fists nearly drawn, until a U.S. duty officer stormed in to break it up. But suspicion had already ignited. That night, I couldn't sleep. In the dark, the breathing of my barrack mates was heavy, as if carrying an invisible battlefield. Half clung to hatred like a talisman. The other half faltered, asking, if the enemy had hearts, what was the war for? I heard Karl, a young soldier from Munich, whisper to the man beside him. I thought of my daughter. She loves sweets. When I ate that candy last night, it felt like she was smiling at me. If the Americans want to fool me that way, I'll take it. The other voice answered coldly, tinged with scorn. Then you'll be a traitor, Karl. Don't forget your father died on the Eastern Front under the Soviets. Silence returned, but the fracture had carved itself deep, like a crack in concrete after a storm. Even the Americans weren't at ease. Passing near the kitchen, I overheard mutters. A sergeant growled, I don't see why command pulled that stunt. Gifts, carols. These men killed our brothers, and now they sit eating candy like children. We're feeding snakes in our own house. But a private shot back. Don't you get it? If we treat them like animals, they'll bite. If we show them humanity, at least they stay in line. I'd rather hand out candy than face knives hidden in pillows. Their words proved division existed beyond the wire too. Mercy or iron fist, what truly kept control in war? Inside me, Christmas left neither joy nor pure suspicion. It felt like a wound still bleeding, painful, yet warm. I remembered the Americans singing Silent Night with us, German and English voices stumbling yet sincere. In that moment, I forgot I was a prisoner. I was simply Jakob, the boy once standing in a Hamburg church, listening to his mother sing with the choir. But the next morning, when the whistle shrieked for roll call, I was yanked back to being number 2,176. And I wondered, would that fleeting moment help me survive or destroy me with false hope? 2 days after Christmas, an incident deepened the tension. A group of prisoners tore up their gifts, scattering pieces across the assembly yard, shouting, "We are not beggars. Give us freedom, not candy." Guards intervened, dragging them to solitary. The camp buzzed. Some praised them as brave, loyal to Germany's honor. Others shook their heads, quietly tucking candy boxes beneath pillows, guarding their tiny sparks of light. That evening, Becker spoke again. "You see, that is German spirit. We don't need pity." But Karl shot back. "What spirit when my child grows up without a father? When my mother starves? If a pair of socks keeps me alive this winter, I'll take them. Not because I'm a coward, but because I want to live to go home." No one replied. Each turned into the shadows, clutching their private faith. I realized this Christmas had become a turning point. It wasn't just a feast or gifts. It was a mirror, reflecting every soul trapped inside. Those who clung to hate, those who longed for forgiveness, those who only wished to survive to see home again. From that day, the camp felt different. The Americans still rationed food, still enforced discipline. But among the prisoners, silence had split into two currents. One sealing hatred like armor, the other letting compassion slip in like a breeze. I didn't know which side was right. I only knew I was stuck in between, with my blue notebook and trembling words, recording each moment as if writing them down was the only way to keep from vanishing. That night, under moonlight spilling across the yard, I wrote, "Perhaps war doesn't kill us with bullets. It kills us by forcing us to choose, to hate or to love, to doubt or to trust. And every choice carries its own price."